let's get on to the news.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North South America, all the ships and clippers at sea. Let's go to press.
Well, we got a lot of news this week, so let's see if we can get through it. First up, there is a game from Stonemaier Games, designed by Jamie Stegmaier and Alexander Schmidt, called Red Rising. Red Rising is named after the futuristic dystopian novels by Pierce Brown. Did anybody ever read the Red Rising series at all? I read the.
I have not, no.
I read the first one. It's pretty good. It's not bad. The idea is it's set on Mars, a futuristic society that's divided into all these different castes, right? These social classes, and each social class has a color, right? And it's from the point of view of a red. And the red are the ones that are out there on the surface of Mars trying to, trying to terraform Mars. they're trying to build things and fix things and make it so that people will eventually be able to live on the surface of Mars. And this character finds out in the first book that, oh my God, no, if you go any in that direction or that direction or that direction for a little bit, there are domed cities and parks and all sorts of stuff. It's a total lie. This is the red caste is basically living in slavery, being told that that you have to do this hard work just so we can survive. And no, they've been living on the surface for years and years and years. And then he tries to infiltrate the gold caste, the sort of noble, highest level caste, and so on and so forth. I haven't read the rest of the novels, but I thought the first one was quite good. This game is going to be a hand management combo building game, so a card-based game. Should take about an hour. You start with 5 cards, and the cards that you play, I believe, start with your own faction and then move out from there. So, Trey, does it sound a little Game of Thrones-y to you a little bit in terms of the factions and all that?
Oh, maybe. Sure. I mean, it goes back to Magic, right? Different color cards with different functions. It looks like it plays 1 to 6.
Yes.
Game of Thrones was kind of set up to be
one-on-one
2-player game.
Yeah.
And then they had a 4-player, which was kind of a whole different thing called Melee. Whereas this seems lighter, and I don't think it's deck construction. I don't think people are putting together decks before they show up. I think it's more like you're going to sit down and play, and then you're going to spin off from there.
Yeah, I think this would be closer to the Dominion model of building up your hand and building combos out of the cards that you have. Right. Yeah. So definitely. So not like I guess not like Game of Thrones in that sense, but I do think that the factions, if the different colors of cards have strong proclivities. I thought the Game of Thrones card game did an amazing job of really having decks that felt very thematic and very different and really urged you towards different styles of play, right?
That's the potential, right?
Yeah.
Obviously Jamie's got a pretty good track record here, so that anything that he puts out, I'm going to want to check out. Yeah. So I'm excited to try this.
And this should be this is going to be coming out on February 16th. It's going to be on Kickstarter. And $1 from each game is going to be donated to the ACLU to support the rights of the underrepresented and marginalized. So
great.
Yeah. I love that. I'm glad that he's doing that. Good on you, Jamie Stegmaier.
Yeah,
we're fans. Next up, a game called Stroganoff. Unfortunately, am I the jerk that whenever I hear the word Stroganoff, I can only think of beef stroganoff?
No, that's where I went.
Everybody thinks that. Yeah, Americans think that. Yeah.
It's super sad because he was an interesting historical figure. Stroganoff is a game by Andreas Stedding, so Hansa Teutonica and Gugon and so on and so forth. Great designer. This is his new game. 1 to 4 players, plays in around 90 minutes, supposed to be medium weight, and gorgeous. It is about expanding across the Russian steppe, and trading furs and making, visiting villages and yurts and fulfilling the Tsar's wishes. And it looks absolutely stunning. Andreas is a really, really interesting designer. So if it plays half as well as it looks, this is going to be a game to watch out for sure, right?
Yeah, this is so pretty.
right?
I mean, just looking at a single image of the board immediately is like, okay, yeah, I definitely want to try this. It looks good. It looks like the right weight. It also does the thing that Transcontinental kind of did, where it's got different landscape tiles that you then kind of looks like you put together as part of your own like personal tableau as the game progresses. That kind of creates a varied landscape that's very pretty.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of Ora and Labora that way, where you're building out your own board, and the decisions you make as far as that goes can be very consequential as well.
When I first saw the art on this, I wondered if it was the same artist who had done Scythe.
Yep.
And it's not, but it is kind of in that same kind of style, minus the mechs.
Oh,
like,
the board cover. The box cover looks.
Yeah.
Looks, if you put a mech in the background, it would look exactly like that, right? But I think that's also partly that Scythe was set in this arena, in this area, just in the future, right?
Yeah, I think also, I mean, what's so funny is Hansa Teutonica famously for the longest time had this box that I think for a lot of people was like the typical, stereotypical dry Eurogame box of a solemn guy just sitting there staring at you at a desk. And now we have Stroganoff, where you have this box with some sort of stag, being surrounded by soldiers in this sort of amber field and mist in the hillsides. It's like, it's so evocative. It kind of says a lot actually about where the industry has gone in the past 10 years or so, in terms of putting an emphasis on these visuals and saying like, this is going to be an experience beyond just the gameplay. Like, we want this to be a full visual immersive experience for you.
Absolutely. And this is
it's already a 10 out of 10 on like table presence. If you were walking past this game
everybody's
at your local con, you would stop and
100%. This one is going to be on Kickstarter on February 15th. So we got some good Kickstarters coming up. Speaking of Kickstarter, there is a game that is going to be going off Kickstarter in just a few days, and kind of slipped my notice, but I want to make mention of it for an interesting reason. It's called Scribbletown. Scribbletown is a city-building roll-and-write game. Now, I think I've made myself clear. I think that roll-and-write games, I'm glad that there aren't, that fad is fading a little bit, at least for me personally, because I don't love multiplayer solitaire games. But Scribbletown is just a little bit different, right? What you're doing is you're going to roll 2 dice. One die has all 6 sides are different shapes. They're types of buildings or whatever. The other side is either either a road die or it's changing that thing, and you're drawing on a hex map. And each of the buildings that you're building have rules, right? You lose points if this building is next to this building. You gain points. So fairly typical in that sort of sense. The thing is, though, in this game is that it kind of takes a design cue from Splotter in that there is waste that is picked up. Like when you do, a lot of the placements that you have are going to generate waste. And when you generate enough waste, you are going to create a rubble pile, which means one of those hexes is just, you're going to take that dry erase marker and just scratch it off. And that thing is just destroyed. And everything around that is going to be penalized because of that. And the cool thing about it is that when you get to the point where you got to make a rubble pile, you don't make the rubble pile. You pass your player mat to the player on your left, and they choose where the rubble pile goes. It
sounds mean.
It does sound mean, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I mean, for a sweet little roll and write, that mechanism is really interesting. I think that's
it's like cartographers. Like with the monsters and cartographers.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, I would say check it out. It's going off of. I think it's only got a few days left on Kickstarter when you listen to this. Check it out. Who knows? I thought it was a very interesting looking design. So take a little peek. Digitally, we got to tell you that Fury of Dracula Digital Edition is going to be on iOS and Android on February 17th. Fury of Dracula, of course, is one of the Scotland Yard games is what I like to call them. They are hidden movement games in which it is one player against many. The many players are trying to track down the person that is somewhere on the map, but we don't know where. And that person is trying to, in some games, escape, and in some games, Fury of Dracula, they might have other options besides simply escape. Have you guys played Fury of Dracula?
I haven't. Sorry to not yes and that.
No. If you haven't, you haven't. It plays
Fury of Dracula is it like kind of like the Sherlock Holmes where you're chasing Dracula around Europe? Is
Yes.
that it? Or yeah, okay. Yes, I have.
Yeah, I think it's a solid game. What's interesting to me is the digital version. I think maybe hidden movement games might be the very best types of games to implement digitally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think that could be I feel like that would work really well with the digital medium.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a good game. I like the game very much. I like asymmetrical games very much. When an asymmetrical game works, I love it. It's a joy because they're so hard to design. They're so hard to balance and to make work right. And so when you have one that does, especially one atmospheric like this, I'm really looking forward to checking this out. It's going to be priced at $4.99, and you can even pre-order the iOS version right now and pre-register for the Android version on Google Play. Yeah, check it out. Maybe you like it.
That's awesome. I'm always a fan when things get digital versions anyway. I just feel like it's just anytime I can easily sample a game that way, I think that's always helpful. Whether it's Board Game Arena, digital, an app, that I think is actually doing a huge service to gamers.
Totally. Next up, Gavin Brown, one of the designers of Brass Birmingham. Ben, you found this. I never saw it.
I saw it a few weeks ago and I forgot to sort of tell you guys, but there was like a thread on the Brass Birmingham forums where there
buried
David
in the forums.
Tersey buried in there. David Tersey, am I saying his name correctly? Turksey,
I think maybe.
He had come up, a few months ago. He had come up with kind of a variant of Brass that he calls like Isle of Wight,
A two-player Brass variant, yes.
White, yeah.
Isle
And
of Wight.
so people like it, and people are hoping that Roxley, picks it up and publishes it. And so there was a thread going back and forth, like, why won't Roxley do this? Well, can Roxley do this? And then in the middle of it, Gavin Brown said, sorry. Basically, he said, sorry, we can't do that because we're working on our sequel to Brass Birmingham, which will be out in 2022. It's just this like little Easter egg buried in this thread, but it's like that's kind of major news. I think that there's a sequel to Brass Birmingham coming out.
What? Yeah.
What? Major.
Very much looking forward to that. Of course, 2022, no news whatsoever about what it'll be. But, but after doing the review of Brass Birmingham and going back and playing those games, they're so good. And I think both of them are really, really good games and just different enough that they do feel like they're different games. Like I can play one and then play the other and not feel like I'm doing the exact same thing, right? Because the strategies are fairly significantly different. I really love it. We Are French is announcing the new edition of Iki, 2 to 4 player game by Kuta Yamada, and why don't you tell us a little bit about Ben? This is another one. This is another one from you. You have been single-handedly flogging this game for some time now. So here you go. It's coming out. It's going to be published wide. Tell us what we need to know about Iki.
I'm a little nervous because I have been championing this game on the podcast a little bit, and I'm afraid that you guys are all going to play it, and and then I'll be kicked out of the group. But I love it. It's basically a game set in Edo era Japan, and you're in a marketplace. I forget the name of the marketplace, but a real one. And it's essentially a rondel game, and you have these guys that go to the marketplace, and they go to the stalls, and when they go to the stalls, they get goods, and they go around and around the loop, and you get the goods to do various things. You may need some things to feed your workers at the end of the season. You may need to do some stuff to stave off a fire that happens 3 times a game. You may need to do some stuff so that we can build some buildings, typical resourcey kind of things. But there's also this element where you can hire people. And when you hire people, you put them in those stalls. And so that's good because when people visit, but it's good because you can visit your guy and you can get something that you need. So you can sort of tailor these stalls for your strategy. But also when other people go to these guys, stuff happens and it can contribute to your engine ultimately. I'm not going to get into all the details, but it's a really beautiful game. I've just loved it. I recommend people go look at some of the run-throughs that are out there on BGG, and you'll get a sense of it. That's what I used to make my purchase, and I've just adored the game. So it was had an extremely limited initial run, and now it's getting a big thing from We Are French. And there is a little bit of controversy because We Are French is redoing the art, and the original art was in a different style. The original art was in a style that was seems to be more authentic to Japanese art, but so that has gone by the wayside, and a lot of people are upset about that. A lot of people who have the original edition are really pissed because it was beautiful art, and it was very charming, and it was very lovely, and it made sense with the game. And the new art is, but the new art's good. I think the new art is good. It
looks
different.
beautiful, but it definitely looks safer, right? It looks more traditional, more gamey, right? It's characters that are drawn in a normal fashion. Whereas
how do you spell the name of this game?
IKI.
IKI. You might even see I wrote like a very extensive review for it on my blog back in like 2015. So it seemed like a wonderful review. Like I feel like I wrote such a good review at the time. I don't know if it still holds up, but if you
here's the thing. Looking at the old art, it is really, it draws the eye. It's dynamic. It's interesting. It's almost cartoony. It's somewhere in between a cartoon and that Japanese calligraphic style of that. It's in between the two, though, which is kind of really interesting. The newer version, on the one hand, looks better, ? Because it's more representational, and obviously more money was spent on the art assets, it looks like. But at the same time, it just looks more generic. It looks more like a lot of the other, a lot of the art of a lot of games.
Also, the original art for Iki, the original game board, was patterned after a mural that exists in Japan. I'm sorry, I don't remember the actual town, but apparently I think it's actually I could be wrong. I believe it's actually hanging right now in a subway station, like prominently as a piece of art. But the point is, it is based on a piece of art from that period, and I think the art style in the game, in the original version, all stems from that. And so I think a lot of people are, they're upset because they love that art, and it is wonderful art. But my feeling is this: I love the original art, but I think the game is so good that if we have to maybe have slightly more generic art for the sake of getting this game to people's hands, because I think it's a really special game, I'm okay with that ultimately.
Well, you better be, because as we've discussed, when we play Iki, that will determine whether or not you remain in the Game Brain crew. I mean, you've been telling us how amazing it is. It's put up or shut up time. We're going to have to just take a look and then reevaluate your membership.
They've also tweaked a few little rules, by the way. Just so as far as I can tell, they've tweaked some rules. Not sure if that will have an impact or not, but there is that too.
Just a little note to our listeners here. We annotate all of these podcasts. So if you're thinking, I didn't get the name of something, kind of like what happened to me there, it's like, I don't know how to spell this. Any game that we talk about in this podcast, it will be in our show notes. So you can go in your podcast, you can click on the link, and it'll take you to whatever game that we're talking about here. So I don't know how many people know that, but we spend a lot of time, or I spend a lot of time annotating the podcast. So you can always check the show notes and go to a link.
Yeah. It takes quite an amount of time and quite an amount of effort, and we thank Trey so much for doing that, because it's invaluable.
Click on my links.
Click on Trey's links. He spends hours. His fingers are bleeding.
That is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So for sure, I feel like actually it's really important that we all appreciate that that work that you do, because
Totally.
that's major.
And
Dimitri did it
Dimitri
for
as
like
well.
the first,
That's right,
first 60 episodes of the show. So Dimitri was the original annotator.
Yes. Yes.
Before he
OA.
went on to fame and Hulu.
He was fired for cause. Let's just no. He was not. He was not in any way. Two more games. We got a lot of games today. Now or Never is the new Ryan Lockett game. Ryan Lockett is a game designer who did Near and Far and Above and Below, I believe, are the other two in this series. And this is the third one, Now or Never. The interesting thing about these games is that they tell kind of a continuous story. Near and Far is about refugees fleeing a land beset by war. Above and Below are them trying to settle in a new place and exploring both the underground caves of a town and building a town above. And Now or Never is a group of people coming back to the place that they fled and dealing with the rumors of bizarre monsters. And a couple of things cool about this is that, first of all, Ryan Lockett is not just the designer, he's also the artist. And the art is striking. It's beautiful. It's all three of these games are put together from a visual design perspective in some very interesting ways. The second thing is that these are story games. These are games that play as a game, but also have a game book. And when you make a choice, you open the game book and you see what happens, as it were. So it's a little choose your own adventure. Wouldn't you say, Trey?
Well, I haven't played it, but I did. I mean, the whole game book idea is something we talked about with Jaws of the Lion, right?
Yes.
Like that. I think we're going to see more of this in a lot of games.
Totally.
So I'm eager to try. I'm eager to try this one.
Yeah. The interesting. So in Above and Below, you have to. There's pretty much only one way to play it, which is going through the storybook. And for me, it was a near miss. First of all, it's a little light for my play style,
Right.
but also it's not quite enough story to be a great story game. But there's enough story in it that the mechanics of the game don't make it a great Euro. You know what I mean? It was kind of in between the two and never quite enough of one to really hit. This new version, the Now or Never version, has two modes of play, standard and story. So you can play a version which you're going through the storybook, or you can play where you're simply playing the mechanics of the game. Maybe that's going to answer that question for me. Maybe that's going to solve that problem.
I'm trying to think, is there any game, because we've had a lot of these games that end up being a little choose your own adventure, and like it seems like the writing never is anywhere close to what we would like it to be. Like, and I feel like maybe there's a few games that are like detective games, like Sherlock Holmes, detective. Like the writing has been good enough in those games, but like outside of those particular ones, does anybody have any where they feel like, oh no, the writing's really good in this game?
Yeah, I mean, we're all writers, so we're all jerks, and we don't like what anyone else wrote.
I haven't seen any, but maybe board gaming will start to move in the direction of video games, which is that video games have sort of merged with Hollywood to some extent, and the quality of writing in some video games has really gone up a lot. So maybe that will be a direction for board games too.
Speaking as someone who has written on a couple video games, it is definitely getting better, but it's still a long way to go in the video game world. There is good and there is the rest, and good is still a fairly small portion of that in terms of telling really, really great stories. But as you said, it's getting better every single day. And maybe we'll hear too. I think try and answer your question.
Like video games are doing it though. I mean, like people can point to plenty of like Last of Us and plenty of other RPGs that take you on long journeys. Like the writing in some of those is really excellent. But board games is like it's such a hard task.
Yeah.
Like I remember we kind of tried to do that in Seafall, and it just ends up being what they're really saying is that you got these resources.
Yes. Yes. So here are the two that I think of that do a good job telling story. First is Detective. The game Detective, I think, does an amazing job of it.
Right.
And as I said a couple weeks ago, they do because of a very specific reason. It's based on a real case. Right? They use real cases, and real cases have, I mean, if you watch any true crime, there are great twists and really interesting discoveries and things like that. And if you're basing something on that, guess what? You've got a great plot already, and just build that out. You can do that, and they did. That's fantastic. The other thing that I would say is, even though I have not officially played it yet, looking it over and reading through it, I think that. The Legacy game. Oh, why am I blanking on the name now?
Pandemic?
No, not Pandemic Legacy.
Charterstone?
No, not Charterstone. The horror one.
Beyond Betrayal, House on the Hill.
Legacy.
Yeah, Betrayal Legacy.
Yeah.
Betrayal Legacy, I believe, has got some really great, really, really good story in it. So I look forward to trying that out. But everything I've read about it says that it really excels in that. So we'll have to see. But Ryan Lockett is a very interesting designer. If you like your Euro games a little lighter and you want to put a little more story into it, I think this is also a really good game to play with families and with people of different ages. So check it out, now or never. And last but not least, paradoxically, one of my favorite games of all time is Castles of Mad King Ludwig. It is a game that I played with my kids all through growing up. And, a lot of games you play with kids, it is a sacrifice and a compromise. Castles of Mad King Ludwig never feels like that. It is a genius design by Ted Alspach. The idea is super simple. Each round, one person is the auctioneer, and he is drawing cards to put out rooms that will go into a castle of various types, 5, 7 different choices, and he's putting them at different price points. Right? So it's not bidding per se. It's rather saying, okay, this room is going to cost 1,000. This one is going to cost 3, 5. This one's going to cost 10, and this one's going to cost 15, so on and so forth. Something along those lines. And then going around the table, people can pay them to take one of those things and add it to their castle that they're building. And then play returns, and now the next person is the auctioneer, and so on and so forth. And the buildings, the rooms of these buildings have very different geometries. They are circles, they're squares, they're long hallways, they're L shapes, and so on and so forth. They have different they score different points based on the type of room they are. And some rooms like the sleep rooms should not be near the activity rooms, right? Because it'll keep you up. So you score negative points if those rooms are next to it. So it creates this tile-laying game in which the tiles are all different shapes, and they're all different, and they have all different requirements. And at the end of a game, it has that tangibility thing that I talk about sometimes, where I don't care if I won or lost. I love my castle. I love my castle. I would sleep in this room, and we have longer discussions than the game itself, talking about the pros and cons of each of our castles that we have built during the game, which is that
is to me the entire appeal of that game. The point, winning is fun, but it's more fun to be cracking jokes for however long it takes about the fact that you put a bathroom, you have to go through the bathroom to get out of the foyer to get into the kitchen. All these weird things. Staircases to nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. And guess what? The collector's edition is on Kickstarter right now. So check it out. It has all new artwork. It already looked gorgeous. Now it looks crazy gorgeous. It's got organizational trays. It has all of the expansions, including a new expansion called the Royal Decrees. Royal Decrees, really simply, is a deck of cards that you're going to be able to get You're going to get a card at the start, and it gives you an asymmetrical goal. It is going to say, for you and you alone, you don't score negative points for these rooms, or you get twice as many points for this type of situation, or you're looking for this, right? And by doing that, by having a secret goal, it gives you some interesting play options. I love the game. I think it's great. The expansions to me were fine. Some things were better than others, but it's kind of one of those games that the original edition of it is so good that I almost don't need much else. But for long-term play, check out the collector's edition.
I too am a fan of this game, and I saw this Kickstarter news and went and checked it out, and I agree, it completely looks beautiful. But I also saw the price tag involved,
How much?
and then I immediately went and ordered the base game.
You know, by the way, for people should know that it is also available as an app, and it's actually a really good app. And I too really enjoyed this game, and I actually backed the deluxe version of Suburbia, but I didn't back this one because I wasn't as excited by the expansions, and I felt like with Suburbia, I felt like the deluxe quality of it was something I desperately needed because I always felt the original was so ugly, and I love a city building game, and I want my city building games to feel like I'm building a city, and I felt like with the new art, that was going to take me where I needed it to be. And plus also Suburbia has really good expansions, and there was like a lot of fun stuff in that. So I backed that, and of course I haven't played it. It just, pandemic came, so I have an enormous box. So that's also part of it, which is like, am I going to get another, like U-Haul truck sized box and then have just like not play it? So I'm on the fence.
Maybe
but you're kind of pushing the needle for me, I have to say.
I mean, maybe this is going to suffer because the original game does look good. So do you need a deluxeified game when the original game looks really good? I mean, though this expansion this collector's edition is gorgeous. I would say this. I would say that if you like this game already, I would seriously consider that because it'll give the game some longevity. You'll be able to play it more and more and more, and there's more to it. If you've never played the game before, the base game is so good. It's really a classic of design. You might want to check out the price points and the differential between the two and make up your mind that way.
I would actually just like to have a regular Castles of Mad King Ludwig with this art, which I think this art may have been, there's a Polish version of the game that has this fancy art, I think, because I like the art in the original. I don't think it's actually that gorgeous, but it works. And I don't know if I necessarily need the trays or whatever, but I feel like the longer I look at this page, the closer I am to backing it. So I have to.
Right.
I like the royal decree idea. I like the idea of having a rule-breaking power that allows you to value buildings differently than other people do. I think that's really interesting because a lot of the strategy of the game is figuring out what is the undervalued asset that I can purchase, and when it's your turn, how do I value these things to get the maximum money out of it? That's really what the game is, and it's a very clever design. So if you have another element in that calculation, an asymmetrical element in terms of what people value, that makes those decisions all the more crunchy. So there you go.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.